We visited all 5 of Utah's national parks, and today we're going to give you the inside scoop on all of it. We're going to tell you how we got there, where we stayed, the hikes we did, and whether we got tired of the red dirt or if it was just simply amazing. If we haven't met before, we're the Shin Paws. We're a family of 4 who travels full-time so we can make memories now. Make sure and stick around to the end though, because there's a surprise adventure we didn't know existed. We'll also tell you which one was our favorite and why. Let's get started. We started our trip at Zion National Park, and it was really easy to get to. It's not far off the highway, and the road between the highway and the campground was in great shape. We stayed at White Bison RV Resort, and it was more of a glamping trip than a camping trip. We even made a separate video about it because it was so good, and you can check that out when you're done watching this. White Bison has all different size RV spots. It even had wagons, teepees, and cliff dwellings that you could rent. So if you wanted to go to Zion with people who don't have an RV, then you could totally make that work. So White Bison was awesome. It was one of the nicest campgrounds we've ever stayed at, although it was still under construction. So check out their website if you decide to stay there too. We were also only about 20 minutes from the entrance of the park, and that was super convenient. So what hikes did we do? The hikes that we did at Zion were Angel's Landing, the Narrows, and an overlook hike. So Angel's Landing is the most technical. It has a lot of elevation to it. There are switchbacks, and when you get up to a certain point, you're rock climbing with some chains to hold on to. We had done this before, so we knew what to expect, but in full transparency, Jason and I did not do the full chain section.
Not sure I can do this.
We started up it with the kids and realized that we just needed to pass.
I didn't make it. I have so many emotions right now.
And so the kids completed that hike to the summit without us. It was awesome to see them coming down. I was so relieved. And they had such a great experience hiking Angel's Landing that we did make a separate video about it. So if you want to see that in detail, check that out. We also did the Narrows. Now the Narrows is really cool because you actually hike about a mile down to the riverbed, and then the rest of the hike is all through the riverbed. And depending on the time of year and how much rain they've had, the water could be below your knees or it could be up to your armpits. It was the very first day that hike opened, so it was kind of the most dangerous of the safest days, is what I like to say. But the water was flowing pretty good, but we had a great time, and it's such a cool experience. The last hike we did was the overlook hike. This is really one that anybody can do, and you get to drive through the tunnel in order to get there. So I highly recommend any of these hikes, and just do as much of them as you can. You will not be disappointed. The thing that we enjoyed the most about the park and the scenery was just the magnitude of it all. During the day, the sun hits the rocks and just intensifies the orange and the red and the burnt brown colors. And the green trees against that is just, it's really hard to describe, but it's incredible. Because it's a dark park, at night, you can see the stars so well. So between being higher up and no artificial light, the stargazing is incredible. The other thing that I loved here, which I didn't even know was an option, was being able to ride our bikes. We parked down by the visitor center, then we rode to Angel's Landing one day and the Narrows the other. And once we got past a certain point, we were on a road where only the park buses were allowed to go, so there was hardly any traffic. It was super safe, and you could just ride and enjoy the views from a whole different perspective. From Zion, we went to Bryce. It was really easy to get there. We took 15 and we drove about 2 hours. We ended up staying at Ruby's, although we really wanted to boondock. Well, we're on the hunt for a boondocking spot here at Bryce, and we've stayed here before in a fifth wheel, but so far we've driven down 3 or 4 different paths, and there's just no way we can take the Prevost down it.
No.
There's either super deep ruts or it gets too narrow with the trees, and we just have too much invested in that bus to take the chance of whacking something off the ceiling or scratching the paint from tip to tip. So here's a glimpse of what we're finding. Ruby's is great though. It's the gold standard in the area. We were able to get in at the last minute, so that was fantastic. A great thing about Ruby's is that it's right next door to Bryce National Park. We actually rode our e-bikes into the park, and that was great. The bike trail is awesome, and it curves and zigs and zags, so if you like to ride your bikes, definitely do that. The hike that we did was the Queens Trail to Wall Street, which was about 4 miles, and a pretty steep climb with 450 feet of elevation change. However, the views were magnificent. It put us right down in the middle of the canyon, and we checked all of the boxes being at Bryce on that hike. What we really loved about Bryce was that we were at the top of the canyon looking down. So that was a complete opposite view of what we had at Zion, and it was really, really cool. After that, we drove about 3 hours and headed to Capitol Reef. We boondocked in the dirt in Capitol Reef, which is what we wanted to do on this trip. However, some afternoon storms were kicking up, and Jason had us move the bus the second day there because he was concerned that we would get stuck in some wet mud if we stayed in that first spot. So we still boondocked, but we just chose a higher, drier, more compact surface, and we were fine there for the next few days. We did the Hickman Natural Bridge hike, which was about 2.8 miles, and it was really cool because you hiked through and around all of the red rock, and there was even sand as part of the trail. The colors on this hike were amazing.
The goal of this hike is to stand right there and get a picture like that.
Something that we didn't know about the park is that they have orchards, and you can pick fruit in the park when it's in season. We didn't get to do that. We were there a little early, but I tell you, I'd go back just for that. From Capitol Reef, we headed to Moab, and Moab became command central for Canyonlands and Arches. It took us a little over 2 hours to get to the campground, and we stayed at Goose Island Campground in Moab. This is a first come, first serve campground. It's affiliated with the National Park System, so it cost us $10 a night with our National Parks Pass. Now, we didn't have any hookups, but we had pit toilets and we were on the river. And we were so close to Arches. As an aside, our kids paddleboarded down the river that went behind Goose Island. I loaded them up in the truck and went upstream a few miles and then let them out, and they had an awesome time. So that was another unexpected thing that we did. Being at Goose Island Campground, like I said, it allowed us to go to Canyonlands and Arches without having to move the bus. Now, Canyonlands was almost a 45-minute drive, but just like everything else that we'd done up to this point, the drive was just as awesome as the destination. We went to Canyonlands and did the Murphy Point Outlook hike. It was about 3.3 miles, and it took us all the way out to the point. And this view reminded us of being at the Grand Canyon. I would say the one word that summarized Canyonlands to us was views. Views, views, views. While we were driving through the park, and especially on this hike, so many times we would just look up and we couldn't believe the views. Finally, we went to Arches. From our Goose Island campground, we were maybe 3 miles from Arches, and 2 of those miles was just the little road that we were down. We drove over to Arches one evening and just got the lay of the land. The sun was setting. We were checking out all the different rock formations. It was a great couple hours. Then the next day we went back and we did the Delicate Arch hike. It was about 3.2 miles. And again, we did this in the evening. It was beautiful, but you do scale up the side of the mountain for a good portion of it. And the final part of the hike is around the mountain on a narrow trail. So if you don't like heights, it might bother you. The evening that we went, it was really windy. So when I got to the very top, I felt like I was holding on for dear life. I know I wasn't going to blow off, but it just the combination of being at the top and the wind and the drop off, I just planted my feet and was still. But you do have to go all the way to the top in order to see the natural bridge. You don't even get a glimpse of it until you get right up on it. We moved a little more quickly coming down this hike for 2 reasons. First of all, the sun was setting and we didn't want to get stuck in the dark. But you talk about a magnificent time to be up on the mountain. The sunset was incredible. But secondly, we wanted to go out for pizza for dinner, but most of the restaurants closed at 9. We did find one that stayed open later, so as soon as we got in the car, we picked up the phone, called in the order, and hightailed it to the restaurant. And I'm happy to report that we got there on time and brought home some amazing pizza for dinner. What we enjoyed about Arches was just how easy it was to drive around. And not only was it easy to drive around, but there were miles and miles and miles of just completely different rock structures and formations. There was a section that kind of looked like a downtown skyscraper. There was another section that had all of these balancing rocks. It was just so amazing to see all these different, I know they're not really ecosystems, but they just look like they're completely different ecosystems all in this 20 or 30 mile area. So that was really cool about Arches, and we especially loved the balancing rock formations. In just a minute, we're going to tell you what our favorite park was and why. But before then, put in the comments which one is your favorite. Which one do you think is our favorite? We can't wait to see what you have to say. Now we're going to talk favorites. Everybody's going to say what their favorite park was and why. And if there was a close second, I think that would be worth noting.
Can I go first?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I want to go first so nobody takes mine. My favorite park was Zion. I thought it was outstanding, and I love that we were there for opening day of the Narrows.
By far, favorite park was Zion. I'm right there with Dad, and it was so special to get to do Angel's Landing this time because the first time I chickened out before I made it all the way to the top, so that was really cool to be able to do it. And I think Bryce Canyon was an honorable second. I loved being able to ride my bike into the park, which was super cool from Ruby's, and I also loved the Queen's Garden Trail that we did. It was really fun. But Zion just did it for me this year.
Willis.
So I'm right up there with Dad and Sarah on Zion for favorite park. I loved Angel's Landing. I loved the Narrows, but I also really enjoyed, and I think Suge's going to agree with me on this one, riding our bikes through the park to the hikes. I enjoyed that a lot. The landscape was beautiful. Now, a close second for me is going to have to be Canyonlands. The drive was beautiful, and it actually reminded me a lot of the Grand Canyon. And it was actually, I felt like it was bigger and more expansive. Like everywhere you looked when you're sitting on the edge, it was just all around. And I really, really enjoyed that. I enjoyed the hike we did there out to that point, and I thought that was a great experience.
I really like staying in Moab and getting to drive to Arches and Canyonlands. And you're right, Canyonlands reminded us of the Grand Canyon, and it was just all about the views. But my absolute favorite was not that. My absolute favorite was Zion as well. And not only is the park incredible, and this time we actually found the Overlook hike. And that was awesome because it's not as strenuous as Angel's Landing in the Narrows. And so we actually found hikes that anybody could do. And so that was really cool. But just the town and being there, it's so easy, right? You can go to the grocery store, you could go to Costco, you can go into the town right there in front of the park entrance and have some coffee and just hang out. It's just a really fun town, a cool vibe, some shopping. So overall, just the area of Zion, I really, really liked. And the bike ride's always going to be my favorite. So it's unanimous. Our family's favorite by far and away was Zion. You need to go check it out. We hope you'll go make some memories now, and we'll see you on the next adventure.